All right, so we are live. Uhuru. Uhuru, Chairman Penny.
Uhuru, Jesse.
Uhuru. So we want to welcome everybody to tuning into this broadcast tonight and want to appreciate everybody for tuning in. This is the Reparations Report. This is Jesse Neville, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, joined by the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess, who is tuning in from St. Louis. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So we know people are coming on both Facebook and YouTube right now. We just want to start off with a disclaimer that if you're watching from Facebook, we want to recommend that you actually head on over to YouTube, because there have been numerous cases of people, including Chairman Amalia Shatella, going live and talking about this issue of coronavirus and biological warfare and being censored and having videos taken down by Facebook. So welcome, everybody. You're watching a special live episode of the Reparations Report, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which are the organizations of white people formed by working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, with our specific historical mission to extend the African Revolution into white society and win reparations to African people, build white solidarity with Black power. And I want to go ahead and just profoundly salute our leadership, the founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Amalia Shatella, who has fought for the liberation of African people inside the US and around the world for over 50 years, building organization all around the globe and keeping the African Revolution alive, rebuilding the African Revolution after the defeat in the 1960s and pushing it to new heights. And the liberation and unification of Africa and African people is on the horizon because of the work that the chairman has done for over 50 years. So I want to salute the chairman. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshatella, who leads the economic front of the African People's Socialist Party, building the basis for an independent African anti-colonial economy. We salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshatella and the entire African People's Socialist Party. And I also want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess. Very honored to be able to co-host this program tonight with Penny, who has worked under Chairman Amalia Shatella and the party's leadership for over 40 years to build principled white solidarity with African liberation as the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, of which I am a proud member. And I also want to salute all of you who are watching tonight, especially those of you who are currently members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, a mass organization, the mass reparations organization for white people to stand in solidarity with the African community. And we are in the midst of a US-wide reparations recruitment week. In just the past week alone, despite the challenges presented by the coronavirus outbreak, which have made it difficult to be out in the streets the way we normally would, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement has recruited 30 new members in the last week. So Uhuru, to all of our new members and to all of our recruiters that have been working hard to build the reparations movement under the leadership of the African People's, under the leadership of the African Revolution, the African People's Socialist Party. All right, so let's cut right to the chase and get into this topic tonight. The news right now, if you're looking at CNN or even just looking at Twitter or Facebook, what you're hearing about is coronavirus. And we want to talk about the relationship of coronavirus, which is known as COVID-19, and how it is being used and treated. We want to show how this relates to the essential questions that we face in this world, which is colonialism, imperialism, parasitic capitalism, and reparations to the Black community. Everyone in the world is probably aware of how swiftly this virus is spreading and the political nature of how governments are responding, especially that of the US government.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Well, I want to salute you, Jesse, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, everybody that's watching. And of course, I want to join in saluting Chairman Amalia Shatella, who is our leadership for all of us who are organized under the leadership of the African Revolution, and Deputy Chair Onezene Shatella, who leads the entire political front, the economic/political front of the African People's Socialist Party. And so many of us work directly under her leadership every single day, which is a great honor. And to salute the African People's Socialist Party for fighting for the liberation of Africa and African people all around the world. And to, and just to say and to reiterate that the question of reparations is what we are about. And so everything that we talk about, we use the party's analysis of African internationalism. We take our leadership from all of the questions and issues that the chairman has analyzed over the years, and of course continues to do, through the eyes of the African working class. And that's how we want to see the world, and we want to come to our conclusions around that. So when we talk about the coronavirus, the COVID-19, that is the specific name of the virus, of this particular coronavirus that is being seen all over the world, we're talking about how it is impacting and even perhaps even started as an attack on African and colonized people. And that this whole question of this epidemic, where it came from, why we are seeing it function in the way we are, why we're seeing the response that we are, and how we know that it is going to impact African people inside the borders of the United States and around the world. So, I just wanted to start by mentioning that I believe it was yesterday, everything is unfolding so quickly, US President Trump turned over the US response to the COVID-19 virus to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and its mission, according to Wikipedia, is to reduce the loss of life and property and protect US institutions from all hazards by leading and supporting the nation in a comprehensive risk-based emergency management program of mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Okay, well, the first thing, one of the most dramatic examples of the use and implementation of FEMA, of course, that is embedded in the memory of anybody who was alive in 2005 was the use of FEMA in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, which was an incredible, obvious assault on African people. It was clearly a colonial attack on the African community. There were 2,000 people dead. Africans were stuffed into the sports dome in hideous conditions, without enough food, without enough beds, just in a very dehumanized kind of way. We saw pictures everywhere of Africans stranded on rooftops and in their attics, with no rescue, with toxic water all around them coming into their house. And we also saw how Africans were shipped out to many other cities, including Texas, including cities in Texas and other places around the country, and they're still there. They were never able to return. And the way that the city and the government used this hideous tragedy, this attack, this colonial attack against African people as a means of gentrifying New Orleans and pushing out African people in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. So that's what FEMA did then. So we're going to see what FEMA is doing now. And just some of the things I would say about that is that the governor of New York already called the National Guard into Westchester County, saying that they're just giving out food, which is, okay, well, Westchester County is probably the richest county in the entire country. And it does have 14% African population, 22% Mexican population, and it is situated very close to Queens and the Bronx. And it's very clear that they're there to prevent anybody from trying to take reparations or have any kind of resistance, to protect the interest of the wealthiest county of the United States. So, we're also seeing how in some cities, the local government is setting up drive-by testing where you can drive up in your car. They have it set up outside and somebody comes out in a hazmat suit and swabs your mouth and takes your information and sends you the results. Well, here in St. Louis, which is predominantly African city, they've just set up one that was in the news, and that is going to be in Chesterfield, I think it is, a 40-minute drive from North St. Louis, or 30-minute drive from South St. Louis, from where the majority of African people are. And it's again, a very wealthy town. It's only 4% African. So it's not going to help African people in the city whatsoever. This free testing is for white people. So, you know, we're going to begin to see this and how this response carries out in a clearly colonial attack against African and oppressed and colonized peoples inside the borders of the United States.
Uhuru, Chairman Penny, thank you. I think that's so important to uncover that and really take control of this narrative that's being spun by the US media, and really show that, you know, the spread of coronavirus can be attributed to colonialism in one form or another, and the US government response to coronavirus is going to be an extension of colonialism. So I just think that's so important. And when we posted this web show promotion, the question really sparked a lot of discussion. And some people were saying, well, you know, is it a bioweapon, or couldn't it have just occurred naturally that this would have happened? And it's just so clear that nothing happens outside the context of colonialism and parasitic capitalism when the world is dominated by colonialism and parasitic capitalism. So, but the question of where this virus originated is something that has been a subject that's been thrown around and used and itself weaponized against oppressed peoples of the world and against China. And as we know, the novel coronavirus pandemic began with an outbreak in Wuhan, China, which is China's largest city in the central region, a city of 11 million people. And the spread of the illness there, the first occurrence of it was reported in December of 2019. And China has moved swiftly to contain this, to deal with this. They put the city on a lockdown, a quarantine. They've closed down schools and airports and shut down factories, and engaged in what they actually call the people's war against coronavirus, arming the people to be able to take it on. And China seems to have brought the coronavirus under containment, although it is still in lockdown. The virus is spreading rapidly around the world, including here inside the US, as well as in Italy. And increasingly, they're shutting everything down inside the United States: schools, universities, concerts, events, in St. Pete, race car tournaments, everything is being shut down. And the spread of the virus has caused the US stock markets to go down drastically. We saw that earlier last week, where the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted to the lowest point it had been in since 1987. And you know, we know that this is just the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg of what's going to happen when they start to shut down all the economic life inside the US. And the West Coast, Seattle, which has been kind of the epicenter of this inside the US, has experienced a near total shutdown. Restaurants, gyms, universities, workplaces have closed and called for people to work from home. So it's spreading rapidly. The World Health Organization has declared it a pandemic. And one of the things that we want to talk about in this discussion is the fact that, okay, so there's Italy. Italy is clearly being affected by it. But other than Italy, the two countries that have been hit the hardest by coronavirus and that have faced the greatest mortalities, the greatest level of deaths from coronavirus are China and Iran. Now, these are two countries that have already been under siege by US imperialism for quite a while now. And that is one of the things that we wanted to open up and discuss on this conversation tonight.
Uhuru. And, you know, I mean, I think that there's so much about this, but the story that's given to us is that this virus originated from a bat in Wuhan, China, at some kind of marketplace where various animals are sold. but as I've heard somebody else point out, that they also said that Ebola came from a bat, and
Right.
you know, they're saying that all these various diseases arise in bats, and that is very, you know, questionable, and that in fact this story has been met with widespread challenge and doubt as the U.S. attempts to have total control over the narrative and how it will play out. So, you know, the government and the bourgeois media keeps dismissing any challenge to what this virus is as, quote, conspiracy theory. Any attempt to even question the real origins or the history of what the US has done and continues to do on the origins of this virus and many others, is they're condemning that. And, you know, even I've heard them condemn the use of alternative products. You know, hand sanitizers that you're supposed to be buying are marked as antibacterial, and yet this is a virus. So why are we doing that? They're attacking even taking herbs and vitamins, and they're saying that vitamin C or zinc will not protect you from this. You know, just all of these things. They're criticizing people for using natural oils and all this. I've seen all this in the bourgeois media. And so, you know, as Jesse has said, Facebook has been interrupting and taking down posts, also Twitter, for suggesting that the official narrative was and is bogus. And as he said, this live stream may get taken down, and we're urging you to go to YouTube. But we do want to say that this virus comes, as Chairman O'Malley Shatella has pointed out, comes at a very, very convenient time for the US government. It comes at a time when the US has issued sanctions and a vicious trade war against China. And last fall, as Chairman O'Malley Shatella has pointed out, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was going around the world targeting China and its ruling Communist Party, and saying that Beijing was focused on international domination and needed to be confronted with deeper sanctions and not trading with them in any possible way. And you know, that all of this was going on, and it was happening as there was an expectation that this trade deal and trade war might be mitigated to a certain way, to a certain extent, and you know, that Pompeo was going around demanding that other countries continue to trade with the United States and do not, you know, violate U.S. sanctions against China. So it happened very, very conveniently for the United States. And there's even more to that. So Jesse, tell us about more in terms of what the government officials in both China and Iran are summing up.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for just bringing all of that out into the light. And another thing that Chairman O'Malley Shatella has pointed out is that, you know, people have asked the question, well, why would the U.S. do something that would hurt the U.S. economy? And the chairman pointed out that the effects of coronavirus on the US economy are not as great as the existential threat that the rise of China poses to the US economy.
Exactly.
So it's all happening in that context. And now Chinese officials are starting to call it out. And of course, the moment that these words come out of a Chinese official's mouth to really say like the US was involved in this, the bourgeois media, CNN, you know, all the different New York Times and everything immediately whip out their favorite term, conspiracy theory, that just immediately discredits that. And, you know, in some cases, even using terms like wild conspiracy theory. This is supposed to be objective journalism, quote unquote. But anyway, the so-called wild conspiracy theory promoted or put forward by this Chinese diplomat pointed out that the US military was in Wuhan in October 2019. and for hundreds of athletes from the U.S. military for military world games in October 2019.
Exactly, now, when Pompeo was going around the world.
Exactly. So you got Pompeo out there slandering, denouncing China. Then you got the U.S. military going in to Wuhan for military world games in October 2019. When does the first occurrence of coronavirus come about in China? Literally a month and a half later. So it's pretty clear something is going on here. And the Chinese government has really put forward that no conclusion has been reached yet on the origins of coronavirus, despite the fact that the US is already calling it a Chinese virus or a foreign virus and attempting to use coronavirus to further slander and attack the people and the government of China. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Iran, which has itself come under serious assault by the US government in the last few months. I'm sure everybody remembers the general Soleimani being brutally assassinated by US airstrike. Iran has also raised the question in unity with China about biological warfare by the United States. And we've seen coronavirus has hit the Islamic Republic of Iran really hard, including the political establishment. Several well-known politicians and clerics have died from coronavirus in Iran. And two of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's close aides are quarantined with the virus. And the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani's first deputy, Ishaq Jahangiri, is also infected. Several ministers, as well as members of parliament, and a long-serving senior Revolutionary Guard general has died of coronavirus in Iran on Friday, March 13th. So perhaps the US government found a way other than drone strikes to kill off Iranian generals. Lieutenant General Nasser Shahbani, a member of the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps for 37 years, held many senior posts and commands in Iran's military elite. And there was an article on a website called Strategic Culture that pointed out that some of these spokespersons of the US imperialism have been openly gloating and applauding the deaths of Iranian government officials and military leadership from coronavirus. It said the usual suspects in the United States are delighted to learn of the Iranian deaths. Mark Dubovitz, executive director of the Washington-based but Israeli government-connected Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, boasted on Twitter that, quote, coronavirus has done what American economic sanctions could not: shut down non-oil exports. An Iranian government spokesperson responded that it is shameful and downright inhuman to cheer for a deadly virus to spread and enjoy seeing people suffer for it. Dubovitz followed up with an additional taunt, saying that Tehran has spread terrorism in the Middle East and now it's spreading coronavirus. So there you have it.
Uhuru. Uhuru, yes. And, you know, this whole charge by the US government of conspiracy theory is outrageous, because what they call conspiracy theories is just people raising what imperialism, what parasitic capitalism has done, what it's born on, what it does every single day. And that, you know, as the chairman would say, any system that's built on the assault on Africa, the kidnapping of African human beings, and the theft of their labor as enslaved African work machines turned into commodities for 600 years would do anything. Why would it not have a bioweapon? Of course it has that. Of course it has bioweapons. What is the difference? You know, the assault on African people is a bioweapon. The genocide against the indigenous people. In fact, it was the US government that gave smallpox-infested blankets to indigenous people. That is a bioweapon. That's when it started. It's part of what US does to maintain imperialist control around the world. It's part of what is necessitated through parasitic capitalism. It has to assault colonized peoples everywhere in order to continue and to maintain the lifestyle for the white population, which sits on its pedestal on the backs of African people. And, you know, it's what the US does. And I think that, you know, when we look at it, I just want to look at a few things, a little bit of documentation of what the US has done. And, you know, I want to start with this book called Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. This is a book that came out, I believe, in 2007. And I mean, the whole book is about that. It's about these kind of assaults on African people inside the borders of the United States and elsewhere. Just the history of what's in here, of what the US government has done to African people, to African women, to African men, to people in prison, experiments, Tuskegee, with putting syphilis into the African community, the experimentation on African women without any anesthesia, in terms of gynecological experiments that were done on African women as torture, sometimes 30 surgeries per one woman. I mean, you know, it just goes on and on and on. And I'm calling on the white community to read this book. We have to take responsibility for what this system does. And biowarfare, yeah, that's what the US does. And the last chapter of this book, chapter 15, is called Aberrant Wars, American Bioterrorism Targets Blacks. And it's, you know, tells a great deal about that. And she starts with two quotes. One is from Professor Malcolm Dando of Scotland in 1999. He said, the development of molecular medicine based on our new understandings of genomics will allow a vast range of new weaponry to be developed. Among that range would be biological weapons specifically targeted at particular ethnic groups. And then she also has a quote that says, I must confirm that the structure of the chemical and biological warfare project was based on the US system. That's where we learned the most. And this is from Wouter Basson, MD, Dr. Death in South Africa, who's still running around today, and the ANC have basically rehired him, and he's part of the system there. And I just wanted to say about him, because this Dr. Death was studying what the US was doing on biowarfare. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. He had something called Project Coast. He created biological weapons to target African people, specifically Africans throughout, not just in the borders of South Africa, but throughout Southern Africa and Namibia, in Angola and other places, specifically targeting African people who were part of the anti-colonial revolutionary struggle. And he was known to have killed at least 200 SWAPO prisoners. SWAPO was the leading revolutionary anti-colonial organization of what is now Namibia, which was called Southwest Africa, a German colony originally where genocide was committed against Africans there way before Germany did anything to Jewish people. And, you know, it goes on. This Dr. Death did things like impose drugs. In that case, it was ecstasy into the African communities based on what the US did here, imposing crack cocaine into the African communities here. In fact, he also did things like spray revolutionaries whenever he could with a bio weapon that was also laced with ecstasy. So, you know, they just did a million different kinds of things. He studied nerve agents and all of this. So this was Dr. Death. He was basically pardoned by the ANC regime. And they, in fact, Mandela hired him as the Surgeon General or something. And he's continued to be activist. And it says on Wikipedia that he actually he has speaking engagements all over the world for what he has done. So I wanted to just read a little bit about of a few things that Harriet Washington is saying in this book. So she is saying that despite US insistence that it was only developing defensive biological weapons, the Central Intelligence Agency in 1952 entered into a partnership to produce chemical and biological weapons with first strike capability. The Army's Special Operations Division laboratories at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is very infamous as the center of biological warfare laboratories and development and study inside the US, although there are many, many other places. And that served as the site of the Joint Army-CIA program dubbed MK Naomi. And MK Naomi, Naomi, was a subset of MK Ultra, which is the US mind control, CIA mind control program that also had different ways of poisoning leaders, and biological warfare was part of that. And recently I read, and others, and I believe the chairman read, a book called Poisoner in Chief about Sidney Gottlieb, who was the head of the MK Ultra in the 1950s and 60s, and all about that program that includes biological warfare. So this is one thing that she's describing in here, an attack on public housing projects. And in this particular one is one in Miami called Carver Village. And she's saying that Fort Detrick's Army Chemical Corps laboratory bred more than 4 million mosquitoes per day and released them in hordes around Florida, including near Carver Village. This was an experiment to determine whether these droning syringes on the wing, disease vectors in medical parlance, she says, could be used as first strike biological weapons to spread yellow fever and other infectious diseases, ostensibly among foreign troops during wartime. So they were testing these mosquitoes as to be able, as a vector or a tool to implant deadly diseases that they were going to use on the battlefield during wartime. They're saying that they were using it against the African community and testing it in Florida. And, and whether, and let me just say that the US does not use this against Europeans. It uses it against colonized people. So a test or no test, they were using this against the African community. This was a colonial tool of biowarfare against African people. And, it goes on to say that this, for example, at this public housing project, Carver Village, after it was all these mosquitoes came and infected the people, it was saying that it tripled Florida's whooping cough cases within a year, resulting in 12 deaths, and was also released in Palmetto on Florida's west coast. It said Carver Village was more precisely targeted and subjected to the same strain, which drove up 1955 infection and death rates. And 8% of those 1,080 whooping cough cases affected children 9 years old and under. And it's saying that by 1960, Carver Village residents had been plagued by a rash of illnesses, including symptoms of dengue and yellow fever and deaths. And it's saying that an analysis of the records of MK Ultra, of which MK Naomi was a part, suggests the agency released various biological agents from mosquitoes to bacteria in hundreds of such dispersals, and large number of exposures makes it less surprising, that they use. And then she gives other examples, but I also wanted to say that the government did that here in St. Louis, where I am, specifically in a public African majority public housing project in North St. Louis, not too far from the Uhuru House. In fact, it is now part of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, quote, campus. And they were sprayed with biological agents and chemical agents laced with radioactive dust. And this came out in the 1990s. But it happened in 1955 at St. Doris Bates was a baby when her father died inexplicably in 1955. She has watched 4 siblings die of cancer, and she survived cervical cancer. And it's saying that in the mid-1950s, and again, a decade later, the Army used motorized blowers atop a low-income, AKA African, high-rise at schools and from the backs of station wagons to send a potentially dangerous compound into the already hazy air and predominantly Black areas of St. Louis. Local officials were told at the time that the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But in 1994, the government said the tests were part of a biological weapons program, and St. Louis was chosen, quote, because it bore some resemblance to Russian cities that the US might attack. I mean, you know, it's saying that it was the material being sprayed was zinc cadmium sulfide, a fine fluorescent powder. Now new research is raising greater concern when a sociology professor has raised the possibility, and we know that it's actually a fact because it came out when the cleanup that the NGA demanded for its campus that the city of St. Louis would take on. And she said that those chemicals were mixed with radiation, and they mixed the particles of cadmium sulfide and radioactive particles. So, you know, this is right here in St. Louis. This is what they have done to African people all over the country, all over the world. This is what they continue to do. Biological warfare. This is what it's about. It's not testing it on somebody else, it's using it. And I just want to say that a couple of other things, and that is that she is saying here. Also, she talks about that the United States and Great Britain undertook the training of South African military personnel on chemical and biological weapons, development and strategy, a relationship that was to deepen and continue with ominous implications for Black South Africans or for Africans. And, you know, it's saying it was used during the US, Korea, et cetera. And it just goes on and on. And one other point that she makes is that she says, and this again was written in 2007, she says, today the most notorious pathogens that threaten humans are the organism that causes bubonic plague, the anthrax bacteria, and viruses such as variola, the cause of smallpox, and hemorrhagic fevers such as Lassa, Marburg, and Ebola, and which have been weaponized. And so I think that, you know, when we look at what has unfolded there and the Ebola outbreaks in Africa, often in towns and areas that have a level 4 bioweapons lab of the United States government or one of the universities such as Tulane University in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And that right around there you have an Ebola outbreak, as Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Louise Kinshasa, has raised. And I've noticed how when there's an outbreak on the continent of Africa, the US government always sends healthcare workers there and you know, establishes protocols that the people are supposed to use, but the people resist it, and they always claim that the people have superstition and they have to be educated and all this kind of thing, when the reality is they know what the US does. They know that there are bioweapons labs right in their area. They know what they are. They don't trust the United States. They see what they do, and they're very clear. They're not going to follow what the US says. So this is very clear. This is what the US is doing. It's not unusual. The US has done everything from dropping the nuclear bomb against Japan when there was absolutely no necessity whatsoever to do that. That it just, every possible thing that it has done to colonize peoples, as we said, from smallpox infested blankets to the imposition of syphilis into the African community to a million other things that the US does every single day against African people. Biowarfare is simply another weapon of the US military. That's all it is. And the US military is a colonial, imperialist military that is in crisis, very much in crisis, as we can see today, and that is acting even in greater and greater desperation to maintain its power. It's parasitic capitalism that requires the suffering, oppression, exploitation, theft, plunder, rape of African people and oppressed and colonized peoples around the world. And that simply, it is clear that there is no end to the coronavirus or anything else until imperialism is destroyed and that African working class has power and has the ability to lead the entire African population of this planet into liberation in solidarity and unity with all oppressed and colonized peoples, and even white people who want to commit national suicide and stand on the forward side of history. That's when they're going to get rid of biological warfare, climate disaster, all of the horrors of parasitic capitalism that must suck the bloods of people of the planet Earth to exist every day. That's when the world will be able to heal from this, when human beings will be able to recover and live a life without such attacks and assaults on many different fronts, when African people are free and liberated. And for us as white people, we owe reparations, because our lifestyle, everything that we have, is based on the stolen resources of African people. It's based on the complicity with maintaining these assaults against Africa and African people, and against China, Chinese, Arab, Asian, indigenous peoples around the world, so that we can live a lifestyle at the expense of everybody else. And that world is over. We're talking about the Black Power Blueprint. We're talking about African liberation. This is the future of the planet. So I want to call on white people to return the stolen resources, become a member, and take a stand of reparations. That is the anti-imperialist stand. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Thank you. I just want to completely unite with everything you just said, Chairwoman Penny. And I think that's such an important history and understanding for white people to have, because it can be swept under the rug. We need to read that book, Medical Apartheid. We need to read Overturning the Culture of Violence that you wrote under the leadership of the party. We need to read Chairman Amalia Shatela's books. We need to face the facts. We need to see the truth. And when you start to do that, we shouldn't be shocked that the US government would be involved in bio warfare. I mean, like you said, if they're going to drop an atomic bomb, why would they not weaponize, illnesses and other things like that, and germ warfare? Why wouldn't they do that if they're slaughtering people all over the planet Earth? So it's truly, it's just so clear. It's so undeniable that the ultimate life-destroying pandemic faced by humanity is parasitic capitalism.
That's right.
And the only cure is the victory of colonized African working class people and colonized peoples of the world in, as the chairman says, administering a revolutionary medicine that will flush this nastiness down the toilet of history. And we have a responsibility to forward that. We have to take a stand. We have to be on the right side of history. And we have to understand our responsibility to go into the belly of the beast, win those stolen resources, unleash those stolen resources, struggle with our own white ruling class, struggle with the CEOs, the billionaires, you know, the ones who are profiting in the billions and trillions of dollars from the oppression and misery and torture and pillage of African and colonized peoples around the world. We have a job to do. And I am a member. This is my membership card right here. I am a proud member, card-carrying member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I want to call on you, if you are not yet a member, this is Reparations Recruitment Week. The rest, you know, because of coronavirus, capitalism is having to shut a lot of things down, but the African Revolution is moving ahead, full speed ahead. And so are we as a front of the African Revolution inside of white society. So we can't necessarily be out tabling right now, but that's why we're here talking to you. That's why people were on the phones all day today. Salute all of our comrades under leadership of Ali Ayello, our membership chair, who were on the phones, winning members, winning renewals, upgrades. People are joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement because this is the future. This is the pathway to a future without colonialism, without slavery, and without coronavirus. So join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Join the fight for reparations to African people and get your membership card in the mail. You can do that by going to uhurusolidarity.org/join. And if you are already a member, you should upgrade your membership for Reparations Recruitment Week, because if you do it during this recruitment drive, we will send you a give back as a token of our appreciation for your solidarity with African liberation. It's a very nice button that we've created. It's a red button that has the shape of Africa, and it says, I stand for reparations now, solidarity with African people in the US and around the world. So everybody who joins the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, you know, just to show our appreciation, we're sending those buttons to everybody so you can wear it with pride, because you usually have your membership card in your wallet or something like that. But when you have this button, you can tell everybody loud and proud that you are another white person that stands for reparations to African people and solidarity with the African Revolution.
Uhuru, Comrade Jesse, I know that USM is trying to get a big number of members this week and have been working on it in a really powerful way. And can you tell us how many and give us an update on how many you've gotten so far?
Absolutely. We want to go for 100 members, and we are very serious about that. 100 white people who are turning our backs on the white ruling class and standing with the African Revolution. That's 100 white people, members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, that we want to win. So far, we have won 30. So we're almost a third of the way there. And we anticipate extending this recruitment drive through the rest of the month, because we want to keep the energy going. We want to keep the momentum going. And, you know, we have to just adjust our plans a little bit. We were going to have these different events, potlucks, tables, win members. And, you know, coronavirus has had us change course a little bit, but we're not going into hiding. And that's why we're out here on this this live stream with you, Chairwoman Penny. And we're going to be doing this actually every Saturday night for a while. So I really want to appreciate everybody who has been tuning in. We actually had up to 50 people between Facebook and live stream, and Facebook and YouTube joining us. So I just want to appreciate everybody who has been on with us. And that includes, just to give a quick shout out, Janice Kant, Santosh, Nina Guevara, Temba Shabanda of the African People's Socialist Party, Kristen Forthen, Gil Obler, Jackson Hollingsworth, Virginia Wilson, Edith Armstrong, Chairman Amalia Shatella, Uhuru, our leadership, Chairman Amalia Shatella was tuning in. That's a great honor. We have Opa Hamilton, Judy Robinson, Amanda Carlozzi, Kobina Bantushengo, the Southern Regional Party leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, Tama Gadini, Jamie Simpson, Ron Hudson, Ali Ayello, Renee Nassar, Jeanette Cruz, who is a recruiter extraordinaire out in Spokane, recruiting tons of people into USM this week. And same with Kristen. Kristen recruited her entire family, including extended family. Everybody in Kristen's orbit is now a member. So that's an inspiration. Rashada Parks, Dr. Aisha Fields, the director of the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project and National Central Committee member of the African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru. Diane Tournay, Scott Millender, Congo Ya Sika Bomoko, Mae Johnson, Ann Hirsch, Kota, Jasmine Amber Stade, Maureen Wagner, Paula Lipsy, Valerie Bronte, Bakri Olatunji, the Western Regional Leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. On and on it goes. Ticharwa Masimba, Uhuru Ticharwa from the African People's Socialist Party in St. Louis. So just want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been a really powerful discussion. I want to thank you, Chairwoman Penny, and I want to salute the reparations report. And just wanted to ask you anything else that you wanted to say before we close out tonight.
Well, I really appreciate this. And again, I want to say that, you know, when they are talking about the media, bourgeoisie is talking about conspiracy theories, they're talking about people raising things that the US has done, documented things from, as we have said, putting smallpox in the blankets to indigenous people to carry out the genocide, having syphilis, implanting syphilis into communities of African men for years, for 30 years, without ever telling them or anybody in their family, torturing African women, dropping the bomb, the nuclear bomb, dropping toxic materials here in Pruitt-Igoe housing projects here in St. Louis, using napalm, Agent Orange in Vietnam, using depleted uranium in Iraq and causing literally hundreds of thousands of children born with handicaps and serious physical problems, to things like planting weapons on African people in order to murder them and put them in prison, to all the coups, the assassination, the dirty tricks that the US does around the world, all the ways that they tried, and this was part of MK Ultra and Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro, from exploding cigars to things on different kinds of bioweapons on chairs. In fact, when Hugo Chavez died, when he was dying of a very rapidly progressing kind of cancer a few years ago, he charged the US with using a bioweapon against him. He was very healthy, and then all of a sudden, you know, he died very quickly. The assassinations of Malcolm and Martin Luther King, putting drugs into the African community. This was part of Azani, you know, occupied Azani or South Africa's bioweapons plan that it learned from the United States, imposing crack cocaine into the African community. The MK Ultra, the Operation Chaos, the US release of toxic pathogens that it sprayed off the coast of San Francisco into San Francisco in 1950. I mean, and on and on and on. And I know that there are so many cases of this. It happens every day. This is what the US does. This is imperialism. This is colonialism. And the US, as the current leader of capitalism, has wiped out whole peoples. It turned human beings into commodities. You know, they talk about human extinction that we're facing now. How many indigenous civilizations were already forced into extinction hundreds of years ago? And so this is why we owe reparations. Reparations is the true anti-imperialist stand for white people. Reparations is how we fight this, and not just reparations for whatever we want, but reparations turning the resources back over to the African working class anti-colonial struggle led by the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, and African people around the world in unity with all oppressed and colonized peoples. So, you know, we're just fighting for reparations. This is the stand. There's all kinds of other things that that white left and white people are always talking about, this symptom, that thing, you know, this situation, that individual struggle. It does nothing. It does nothing. It must be a worldwide struggle. It's never going to be led by white working people. that history already shows that white working people are never going to overturn capitalism and imperialism. We've only fought for our own interest, but that the struggle is led by African workers and the colonized workers of this planet. We have the ability to be in unity with that, and that is through paying reparations to the African Revolution, which is the future of all humanity. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess. And thank you, everybody who's been tuning in. We're going to wrap up this special live episode of the Reparations Report with Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And I am Jesse Neville, also a member of APSC and the national chair of our mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And before we close out, we want to encourage everybody who's tuning in to become a member if you are not already. Become a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for our Reparations Recruitment Week membership drive. Go to uhurusolidarity.org/join, become a sustainer, give monthly contributions to the work of the Black Power Blueprint and the African People's Socialist Party. Take the stand of reparations to African people. This is important now more than ever. Also want to encourage people to tune in to Chairman Omali Yeshitela's weekly Sunday study tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Central. And that is called Omali Taught Me, broadcast from Chairman Omali Yeshitela's Facebook page, as well as from the Burning Spear YouTube channel. And we also want to let people know, and we will be sending out more official communiques about this in the coming days, that the USM National Convention will be hosted online. And that is something we will be communicating with people about, how you will be able to participate in that, register for that, and get connected with that. As we mentioned earlier, life as we know it is being totally interrupted right now, but the African Revolution surges ahead in this deepening crisis of imperialism. So we will be coming online a lot and talking to you, talking with you, and summing up these questions from the African internationalist standpoint. Also want to let people know that the African National Women's Organization Conference was postponed to July 10th through the 12th. So before we check off here and tune out, any other last words, Chairwoman Penny Hess, that you want to say before we wrap up here?
Well, I know Black is Back has a program coming up as well, if you want to announce that.
Yes, Black is Back Coalition is, I believe, April 10th and 11th. And I will double check on that and put it in the comments. But that is being held on the question of electoral politics and the whole struggle for Black power in the electoral arena. And that's going to be an electoral training school, actually. That's more information available on that at blackisbackcoalition.org.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right. Thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess. Uhuru. And thank you, everybody.
Uhuru.
Unity through
and unity through reparations.